Before the world teaches you how to win, it quietly asks one question: do you respect yourself enough to begin? Stay with me until the end. The final lessons will truly change your perspective. Self-respect is the root of every relationship you will ever experience, and I want you to really sit with that for a moment. Because before love reaches you, before success recognizes you, before the world decides how carefully it will handle your heart, it watches how you handle yourself in the quiet moments no one applauds, in the choices you make when it would be easier to settle, shrink, or stay silent. Self-respect is not something loud or performative. It is subtle, almost invisible, like roots beneath the soil. But without it, nothing above ground can stand tall for long. And I've seen this again and again in people across cultures, across ages, across dreams that look different but ache the same way. People wondering why they are overlooked, why they feel drained in relationships, why they give so much yet feel so empty, not realizing that the world is simply mirroring back the relationship they have with themselves. When you don't respect your own boundaries, others learn to cross them. When you don't honor your time, others feel entitled to waste it. When you silence your truth to keep peace, the peace you keep is never yours, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, you begin to disappear from your own life. And that disappearance doesn't happen in dramatic moments. It happens in small compromises. Laughing at a joke that hurt you, staying where you feel unseen because it feels safer than starting again, explaining your worth to people who were never listening in the first place. Self-respect is the moment you stop negotiating your dignity for belonging, because belonging that costs you. Your self-worth is never home. It's just a waiting room for resentment. And I know how tempting it is to believe that being accommodating makes you lovable, that being endlessly available makes you valuable, that enduring disrespect is a form of strength. But true strength is quieter and far more demanding. It asks you to stand alone if necessary. It asks you to disappoint others so you don't betray yourself. It asks you to say with calm certainty, "This is how I deserve to be treated," and then live in a way that honors that truth even when no one is watching. Think of self-respect like the spine of your soul, invisible but essential, holding you upright through pressure, through judgment, through seasons where validation is scarce, and without it you may bend for a while. But eventually you will collapse under the weight of expectations that were never yours to carry. I've watched people chase love with desperation, careers with exhaustion, approval with self-erasure, only to realize much later that what they were really seeking was permission to value themselves. And here is the quiet revelation that changes everything. You don't need permission, you need presence. Presence with your values, your limits, your truth, because the moment you start treating yourself as someone worth protecting, the world recalibrates, not always immediately, not always gently, but inevitably. Some people will fall away when you choose self-respect, and that can feel like loss. But often it is simply clarity, arriving without apology, clearing space for relationships that don't require you to perform, prove, or plead. Self-respect teaches people how to love you by teaching you how to love you. Ourself first, not in the shallow, indulgent sense, but in the deeply spiritual sense of alignment, where your actions, your words, and your inner values finally speak the same language. Imagine your life as a house and self-respect as the foundation. No matter how beautifully you decorate the rooms, no matter how many guests you invite in, if the foundation is cracked, everything eventually feels unstable, and repairing it requires honesty, patience, and the courage to admit where you've allowed too much, where you've accepted too little, where you've confused endurance with worthiness. This is not about becoming rigid or cold, it's about becoming clear, because clarity is kindness to yourself and to others. And when you embody self-respect, you stop attracting chaos disguised as passion. You stop mistaking inconsistency for excitement. You stop calling breadcrumbs love just because you were starving. Instead, you begin to choose from wholeness rather than hunger. And that shift is subtle but seismic. If this is stirring something inside you, stay with me, because the lessons ahead go even deeper. And missing them would mean missing the very tools that turn awareness into transformation. Self-respect also means forgiving yourself for the times you didn't know better, for the moments you stayed too long or gave too much. Because shame erodes self-respect faster than any external judgment ever could. And growth begins the moment you say, I did the best I could with what I knew then, and now I choose differently. That choice, made quietly, consistently, is how lives change. Think of a candle in a dark room, how it doesn't argue with the darkness, doesn't beg it to leave. Its imply burns steadily, illuminating its own space, and in doing so, it naturally pushes the darkness back. That is what self-respect does in your life. It doesn't fight the world. It simply defines you so clearly that what doesn't align can no longer stay. And here's the spiritual truth beneath it all. When you respect yourself, you honor the life force that created you. You acknowledge that your existence is not accidental, that your voice carries weight, that your presence has purpose, and living in alignment with that truth is an act of devotion, not ego. The lessons ahead will challenge you to go further, to act braver, to choose consciously, and you'll regret skipping them, because this first step, self-respect, is only the doorway, not the destination. But without walking through it, nothing that follows can fully enter your life. So stay, listen, reflect, because what comes next will not just inspire you, it will demand something from you. And that demand, answered honestly, is where real change begins. Boundaries are not walls you build to shut the world out. They are sacred doorways that teach the world how to enter your life with respect. And this is where many people misunderstand self-growth, because they believe boundaries make them cold, distant, or unlovable, when in truth, boundaries are one of the deepest expressions of self-respect and emotional maturity you will ever practice. Think about it. Anything valuable is protected not by hostility, but by intention. A temple has gates. A home has doors. Your heart needs the same reverence. Yet so many of us leave our inner doors wide open, allowing exhaustion, manipulation, emotional noise, and unmet expectations to wander in freely. Then we wonder why we feel drained, resentful, or disconnected from ourselves. Boundaries are the language your soul uses to say, this matters to me, and every time you ignore that language, you teach yourself that your comfort, time, and emotional safety are negotiable, that your peace can be postponed for someone else's convenience. And slowly, almost invisibly, you begin living a life that looks fine on the outside but feels heavy on the inside. I've seen people who give endlessly, who pride themselves on being available, accommodating, endlessly understanding, yet behind closed doors they are tired in a way sleep can't fix. Because burnout doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from doing too much of what costs you your sense of self. And boundaries are how you stop that quiet erosion. Setting a boundary is not a rejection of others. It is an acceptance of yourself. And yes, at first it feels uncomfortable, because you are unlearning patterns that once kept you safe, people-pleasing, silence, over-explaining. But discomfort is often the doorway to growth, not a sign you're doing something wrong. Imagine your energy like water in a glass. When you keep pouring it out without refilling, the glass eventually cracks. Boundaries are how you learn to pour consciously, to give without disappearing, to love without self-abandonment. And this is a spiritual practice as much as it is an emotional one. Because honoring your limits is how you honor the life force moving through you. Some people will resist your boundaries, Not because they are unreasonable, but because they benefited from you having none. And that resistance can be painful, especially when T comes from people you love. But hear this clearly. Any relationship that requires you to betray yourself to keep it is already costing you too much. Boundaries reveal truth. They clarify dynamics. They show you who respects you and who only respected your availability. And while that clarity can feel like loss at first, it is actually liberation in disguise. If this is resonating, stay with me, because the lessons ahead go even deeper. And missing them would mean missing the tools that turn awareness into real, lived change. Boundaries also teach you how to listen to your inner signals. That tightness in your chest, that quiet fatigue, that subtle resentment, those are not weaknesses, they are guidance. Your body and spirit communicating long before your mind catches up. And when you learn to respond with boundaries instead of guilt, you begin to live in alignment rather than reaction. Think of boundaries like the banks of a river. Without them, the water floods chaotically, destroying everything in its path. But with them, the river flows powerfully, purposefully, nourishing everything it touches. Boundaries don't limit your love. They direct it. They allow your energy to move where it can actually grow something meaningful. Many people fear boundaries because they confuse them with confrontation. But most boundaries are quiet, internal decisions before they are ever external conversations. They are choices like leaving earlier, replying later, saying no without an essay, choosing rest without apology. And these small, consistent acts rewire your relationship with yourself. Spiritually speaking, boundaries are how you move from self-sacrifice to self-honor, from martyred to mindfulness, because you were never meant to be consumed by the world. You were meant to participate in it consciously. And here's the paradox. When you respect your own limits, people actually feel safer around you, because clarity creates trust, unpredictability creates anxiety, and a person who knows their yes and honors their no becomes someone others can rely on without confusion or resentment. If you're thinking this sounds simple but feels hard, you're right, because boundaries challenge the old identities we cling to. The nice one, the strong one, the always available one. But growth often requires shedding roles that no longer serve who you are becoming. The lessons ahead will ask even more courage of you, so don't leave now, because what's coming is where boundaries evolve into self-mastery. Remember, boundaries are not about controlling others, they are about controlling your participation. You cannot change how people behave, but you can choose what you allow. And that choice is where your power lives. When you stop arguing with reality and start honoring your truth, something shifts. Your nervous system calms, your intuition sharpens, your life begins to feel less chaotic and more intentional, not because the world changed, but because you did. Think of boundaries as promises you keep to yourself, and every time you keep one, no matter how small, you strengthen your self-trust. And self-trust is the foundation of confidence, peace, and purpose. If you skip the lessons that follow, you'll miss how this foundation supports everything else. Discipline, courage, gratitude, meaning. So stay, because this journey is building towards something much bigger than comfort. Boundaries also teach you patience, because not everyone will adjust immediately. Some relationships will require time, others will quietly dissolve, and both outcomes are teachers, guiding you toward alignment rather than attachment. There is a deep spiritual humility in accepting that you cannot be everything to everyone, and you are never meant to be. Your role is not to carry the emotional weight of the world, but to carry your own life with integrity. When you practice boundaries, you stop leaking energy into places that don't nourish you, and suddenly you have more presence for what truly matters: your growth, your creativity, your healing, your joy. This is why boundaries feel like freedom once you get past the fear. Because freedom is not the absence of responsibility, it is the presence of choice. And as we move forward, remember this: what comes next will challenge you to act on these insights, not just understand them. And you will regret missing it, because understanding without action keeps you stuck in the same cycles with better vocabulary. So stay with me, reflect deeply, and allow this truth to land fully. Boundaries are not barriers to love. They are bridges to a life lived with clarity, dignity, and conscious intention. And this is only the beginning of what's possible when you choose yourself fully. Discipline is self-respect made visible. It is the quiet, unglamorous proof that you value your future more than your momentary comfort. And this is where many people misunderstand success, because they believe discipline is about punishment, restriction, or force, when in truth it is about devotion, about showing up for your own life with consistency. Even when motivation disappears and applause is nowhere to be found, motivation is emotional. It rises and falls with mood, weather, praise, and circumstance. But discipline is spiritual. It is rooted in identity, in the deep decision that this is who I am, and this is how I honor that. And once you understand this, your relationship with effort changes completely. Think of discipline like brushing your teeth. You don't wait to feel inspired to do it. You do it because you respect yourself enough to care for your future health. And in the same way, the small daily actions you take toward your goals are not dramatic acts of heroism. They are acts of self-trust, repeated quietly until they become character. I've seen people with extraordinary talent fail not because they lacked ability, but because they lacked the discipline to meet their own potential. And I've seen ordinary people create extraordinary lives simply because they kept showing up when it would have been easier to quit, to scroll, to delay, to make excuses that sound reasonable but cost everything over time. Discipline is choosing the long-term vision over the short-term relief, choosing progress over perfection, choosing alignment over impulse. And every time you make that choice, even in the smallest way, you send a message to yourself that you are someone worth investing in. There is a deep spiritual humility in discipline, because it requires you to accept that growth is incremental, that transformation is built in inches, not leaps, and that the life you desire will not arrive in a single moment of inspiration, but through hundreds of ordinary days where you chose to honor your word to yourself. Imagine your future self standing in front of you, quietly watching your daily decisions, not judging, just observing, and every disciplined action you take becomes a gift you place in their hands, while every avoided responsibility becomes a weight they must carry later. And when you see it this way, discipline stops feeling like sacrifice and starts feeling like love across time. If this reflection is landing, stay with me, because the lessons ahead are even more powerful, and missing them would mean missing the deeper connection between effort, faith, and purpose. Discipline also teaches you how to regulate your emotions, because the undisciplined life is ruled by impulse, by reacting instead of responding, by letting feelings dictate direction. But when you practice discipline, you learn that you can feel tired and still act, feel afraid and still move, feel unmotivated and still keep your promise. And this realization is liberating, because it means your life is no longer at the mercy of your moods. Think of discipline like the banks of a river, giving direction to your energy so it can flow powerfully instead of scattering everywhere. Without discipline, your energy leaks into distractions, comparisons, and half-finished dreams. But with discipline, it gathers momentum, carving a clear path toward meaning. Many people wait for confidence before they act. But discipline is how confidence is built, because confidence is not the absence of doubt. It is the memory of kept promises, the quiet, knowing that you can rely on yourself, and every time you show up when it's inconvenient, you strengthen that inner trust. Spiritually, discipline is a form of prayer, not spoken but lived. It says, I believe my life has purpose, and I am willing to tend to it daily, and that belief changes how you treat your time, your body, your mind, your relationships. Because you stop wasting what you see as sacred. Discipline is also how you learn patience with yourself, because growth is rarely linear. There will be days you stumble, fall behind, or feel like you're starting over. But discipline is not about never failing, it's about returning again and again to your commitment without self-contempt. Because shame breaks discipline faster than failure ever could. If you're tempted to stop listening now, don't. Because what comes next will show you how discipline evolves into inner freedom. And you'll regret missing that shift. Discipline simplifies life. Because when your non-negotiables are clear, you spend less energy deciding and more energy creating. You wake up knowing what matters, and that clarity reduces anxiety in ways motivation never could. Think about the areas where you feel most chaotic or stuck, and you'll often find a lack of structure, a lack of consistent care. Discipline brings order not by controlling you, but by supporting you. Like scaffolding around a building under construction, temporary but essential. And here's the